I'm good when you're ready.
I'm always ready, baby. Sorry. Okay.
All right, Chapel, calm down.
Game face on. Welcome everyone to our review of this week's Strange New Worlds episode, Spock Amok, and we were all amok for Spock this episode. I have to say, I am very much relieved we've got a comedy episode. The light-hearted, just no stakes, just a good old little bit of interpersonal drama and some. We were just watching it, weren't we? The three of us just watched this episode, and this is definitely something you watch with other people because we were giggling all throughout it. It was absolutely brilliant.
I mean, I won't say there were no stakes, but the stakes were very tangential to the main thrust of the plot.
Definitely.
This almost felt like a response to people who disliked it. And it is a kind of valid complaint that Discovery and Picard, it's every episode, it's the fate of the Federation, the galaxy, the universe, all sentient life. And, I understand that criticism, and I totally feel it. I don't feel the fatigue, mostly because I probably play a lot of video games where that is always the stake, so it's it just kind of flies over my head. But this felt like a response to that. This could not be less low stakes. What are the stakes here? It's Spock and T'Pring's relationship, which we foreknow from TOS is ruined. There's no saving that relationship. It's negotiations with a species you've never seen before.
This episode is about failed relationships, actually. Now you've said that. That is a lot of promise for things never to come, isn't it? Sorry, carry on.
True, but it's also a case. It's a celebration of what those missed opportunities and failed pursuits give us. We learn from them, so it's not all bad. But yeah, the stakes in this episode were incredibly low, and that's good because you need that after last week's episode. And this is like that. If this is the kind of level of serialization versus episodic we can get every time, you could jump straight into this episode without having seen the previous one. If you'd missed it, say on syndication or whatever, not that it's on syndication, but you know what I mean. And you'd be able to get the context of, the ship got messed up last week and they need R&R. That's fine. I can understand it instantly. There's no continuity lockout. There's no, you have to have seen the previous 5 episodes in the chain. It's this is easy to jump into. The stakes are low. Just have fun.
I think of all the comments we said about the previous episodes where they were put in the previously on Strange New Worlds, at the start. This is probably the one that maybe actually did benefit from a little bit to give a bit of context to Spock and T'Pring, to why the Enterprise is beaten up, etc., etc. Can we move ahead a little bit and just talk about everyone's reaction to hearing the ba 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 and just that little iconic horn as they're stepping onto Vulcan, holding up the Leopards, and just that whole little sequence, which was pure fan service. I was watching the previews when I think before the season started, and I'm thinking, they're doing Amok time again. I'm thinking, how are they going to do that? And I was sitting there trying to count, has it been 7 years since Amok time? Is this going to be Spock's time? Are they going to have to get is it going to be him and Pike in the sand again? But no, they played it off quite nicely. But there was a little bit of I couldn't help myself. I just went, they did the thing, pointing, Leo.meme pointing at the screen.
Yeah.
That's the one.
No, I mean, it was great because they threw you in the middle of it, so you don't really know what's going on. By the time all that stuff starts happening, you still aren't quite entirely sure that it's a dream or whatever. So they got to have their cake and eat it too. They got to directly reference all of this stuff. I mean, quoting the actual Amok time battle theme, and all of the costuming, all of the set. It's doing all of the old Trek fight choreography.
That was what I was going to say. That
bird's eye view, and
that overhead camera angle. As soon as I saw it, and I saw them two rolling around in the dust, I just went, "This is TOS." This is not that I want them to pander to it too much, but that's just a cheeky little. Yeah, we've seen it, we know, and a little nod to the existing fans. I loved it. I have to say.
Yeah, I thought this was perfectly balanced fan service because not only is it just it's so ingrained in culture now that it almost doesn't feel like fan service. It feels like it's just part of culture now. It's even people who have never seen Star Trek know this thing because
especially
it pops up endlessly in everything else.
Yeah,
the Cable Guy, Futurama, everyone's done it, right? But it also helped that it was massively in service of the story, and it sets up a conflict that is integral, and it's a nice way of anthropomorphizing a struggle that Spock is going to deal with for the rest of his entire life. And since this is basically your Spock episode, it's a really easy way to dive in and go, what's the issue with Spock? Okay, this is the issue. There is a literal struggle between his two halves. Yeah. He feels he can't reconcile them. Let's make that as literal as possible, right down to one of them is wearing a Vulcan outfit, one of them is wearing a Starfleet outfit, and there's Ethan Peck with no Vulcan ears and slightly messy hair.
They very much they brought the Ethan Peck out.
Attractive.
They brought the Ethan Peck out of Spock a little bit there, didn't they? And it was like, oh, is this what he looks like in life? Because I can only picture him as Spock, either with a beard or not. You know, this is. But yeah, that conflict
at the same time,
between...
it lets you know how much of the character is still just him, even without the little prosthetics and stuff.
Yeah, I think it's.
I think I just remarked how much he looked like Sarek in his Vulcan side of that fight as well, and there's like the costuming and the way he holds himself. I was like, oh, you look like your father. And I forget the actor's name who plays Sarek in Discovery.
James Frayne, who is awesome. I love James Frayne.
Yes, he was very good in. Was it Gotham? He was in. I think it was Gotham. No,
I'm not sure about that, but I loved his version of Sarek. I thought it was such a nice update on Mark Leonard's version of the character. And yeah, it's also nice you get just a little bit of him internalizing Sarek's criticism of him, which is that goes all the way into Final Frontier. Like we know from like our previous experience, like Trek fans, like 30 years in the future, he is still grappling with these issues, still working through it, and I don't think there's anything quite so let's just confront the problem as let's throw them onto the most lavish version of Vulcan that the AR stage can handle, make it look a little bit Mortal Kombat, but still extremely faithful.
Do you know what's terrible, right? Because this AR stage, I love it because it's great and everyone gets a chance to look at it. It looks really fab, but I can't help but notice every time they use it. And like you just see the wide expanse area, you see the wraparound, and I'm just like, I not that I'm looking out for it, but I think I notice it more here than I do on something like The Mandalorian. Or when I watch, other things use it, and like it's one of those. I remember ages ago having this discussion with my wife, and I said, "Oh, we could watch the best of, the making of features for Lord of the Rings." She goes, "No, I don't want to watch it." I'm like, "Why don't you want to watch it?" She goes, "Well, I don't want to watch it because I don't know how they made it. It will take me out of the film." I'm like, I only now kind of get that you want to sort of preserve the magic in a little bit. You just want to sort of see it for what it is.
This is a total tangent, but I did the same thing back when DVDs were still kind of novel. I bought like the ultimate edition of Terminator 2 Judgment Day.
Wow.
And that was one of the first ones that they really went all in on special features, and they showed you how they did every little thing. And now going back watching that movie, I can say, well, there's where they used where they used the silver T-1000 puppet. This is where they, did the mercury drops, and so I totally get that too. But
no, for me, it does definitely stand out when they use the technology, but it almost feels like they call attention to it. They only pick specific spots where, look, it's obvious we're doing it, but doesn't it look good? So you're like, you get away with it.
Like the end of,
if you're ever going to use an AR set, a dream sequence is exactly the time to do it, is it not?
It's true.
I think I noticed it first at I think it's Discovery Season 4 when they're in that sort of shuttle-based scene and like everyone's sort of placed in the middle and there's this wide expanse, and I thought, oh yeah, I know where you are. I know exactly where you are right now.
But there's something interesting that... Well, sorry.
No, please.
Well, we can weave it in. We'll come back to it.
Okay. Let's talk about how many plots were in this episode. For quite a short episode, they managed to very cleverly write and keep coherent about three and a half different plots. So you had we'll talk A, B, C, and D. A was the Spock and T'Pring plot, which was sort of the main focus of the episode. B was the Pike and the negotiations plot. C was Enterprise Bingo. And all of these are quite significant plots in their right, and then you kind of got a little aside with Mbenga and a little bit of sort of Chapel and Ortega sort of when they're on their own, sort of causing the D plot, as it were, for the episode. But none of those plots felt that like they didn't belong in the episode. It didn't feel like oh, we've got some time, we'll just put that there. They all kind of, they didn't interweave, as it were. Well, they did a little bit, but they all sort of stood alone and just sort of had their space, which was really nice and refreshing to watch.
Well, yeah, they're all tied together with the central theme of having to relate to other people and understanding things from their point of view, which is like a nice kind of broad way that you can tackle it in very many different ways, and still being comedic, but make it serious for others and less serious for people.
The Una Lan one, yeah, that is exactly it, isn't it? As soon as now you said that, I realised, oh yeah, shit, that's what that was about as well. Holy
that's why I think it's handled so well, because it's very upfront about what it's about. It's like it's part of all the dialogue, but it's woven into each and every part. Every scene works toward it so seamlessly that it doesn't feel like it's as in your face of a message as maybe it would have been like in the old days if they tried to do an episode like this, where it's like, Picard would have turned to the thing and been like, I think number one, we should think about relating to people more. And it's like, no, here they're just like, no, we know how good we are at writing we know how good we are at writing these characters in these situations in such a way that it feels like a cohesive whole. And I think that's like there's a lot of like balls being juggled here. There's a lot of character threads going and being picked up from other threads, and just everything was handled well. I didn't feel like anyone was out of character.
I tell you what it feels like. It feels very much back from the times when they had, and this is sort of maybe a little bit of the criticism of Discovery on my part, because disclaimer, I love Discovery, but the criticism that most people have with Discovery is the fact that they don't use their bridge crew enough, or any of the other crew that are sort of maybe the B characters. But this one feels like the episodes where they used to write it and kind of go, oh, hang on, we've got Michael Dorn on the payroll. We need to give him some lines this week. Let's say he's going to be in this plot.
We got to give Kramer a line.
Exactly, yeah. And they'll give him a plot for that. Although this feels a lot more fleshed out rather than just Worf sort of standing up going, yes, sir. And then going, right, you're being paid. Fantastic. Go back to your trailer, please.
Well, yeah, because they are very smart in making sure they are restrained, because while they do touch on all these threads and it does feel like a cohesive whole, Uhura got basically nothing to do this episode. True. She was present in a few scenes, but she got maybe 4 lines.
It was actually
Hemmer did not appear.
No, Hemmer didn't appear.
Yeah, no Hemmer at all. But when I think about how good this episode was, I think about what you could have maybe done to give them more of a part of it, and I think that you only would have ended up either watering it down or risking the kind of the lattice work of threads here. So if it means that we're going to just have to go all cylinders in for the Hemmer episode that I'm sure is coming in the latter half of the season, then by all means, Bruce Horak can wait another week. He was great last week. We can give him a day off, whatever,
Okay, let's tackle these in reverse order. Let's go with the bingo plot with La'an and Una suddenly discovering that the crew. And my favourite part of this whole thing was, aside from the fact it's almost a Lower Decks plot, which you pointed out to me, Stars. It is pretty much a Lower Decks plot. But my favourite part was right at the start when they're transporting everyone down, and Benga goes, "Oh, that explains the nickname," and then he goes, I don't know what I'm talking about. I fucking cracked up at that. It's like, just energize, please, go, let's go.
Beam me out of this awkward moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, for real. Like it felt, it reminded me a little bit of the bits of Starship Mine before the action plot kicks off, where Picard just wants to get off the thing, and it's like there's little bits of the subtle comedy. Like, even though this is a comedic episode, it didn't feel like a farce. Like, it didn't feel like it went quite as hard as, say, like a TOS episode would have gone, where it would have been lots of silly music going off and everyone doing silly faces. Like, no, the comedy was born naturally out of the characters. And I often find that's the strongest kind of comedy, where you address the characters' flaws and strengths and use them against other characters to really just create a naturally funny scenario where because I've complained a few times, especially like last week, about Uhura sounding out of character. Everyone sounded completely in character, despite everyone being a professional, capable, serious Starfleet officer, and they were in these ridiculous situations and saying silly shit, and I was like, no, I completely buy this. And that's the advantage of writing it like this. It holds together so well.
Because they found all of the ways. Spock and T'Pring aside, ways that the characters themselves would find the situation kind of funny. It's like, of course, Una and Lon would get the most enjoyment out of being buddy cops, and of course, it's like
they
Chapel
were having
would be
the
diving
time
into...
of their life. They were, you can tell, for two Starfleet officers that are very much, by the rules, and Una is Rebecca Romijn is very much playing that compared to an android version of number one that was referred to in the cage. You're more machine than woman, as they said back then. But she's sort of playing that with a little bit of plus, and sort of like, no, we can have fun, and they do have fun in their own way, which is kind of exploring what the crew do, and like, are you having fun yet? And I really like.
It's funny. Oh, good.
No, I really like Christina Chong bringing a little bit of the British humour in there. There's a little bit of, I think I remarked on earlier, that whole thing almost felt like a Taika Waititi sort of like script or something like that. Very ad hoc, very kind of like, just make a funny comment or just to do what comes to you, or just sort of like.
Well, yeah, I really doubt. I mean, I guess it could, but I need to go do the security things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Someone who wrote that line, they are a genius, because that feels like an ad lib. But it's like we talked in an episode before when they brought up Enterprise Bingo. I think it was Children of the Comet. Right before the dinner party.
Otagus brings up, yeah.
I fully expected to that be a thing that maybe the fans would pick up on and maybe make up their own Enterprise Bingo. I didn't expect it to come back quite so literally to where you actually see the list on screen. So that's clearly something. So that was something that clearly somebody in the writer's room was like, I'm going to make Enterprise Bingo a thing. Just you watch. And it's playing out over the course of the season now. So.
Yeah, and it kind of ties back into what I really enjoyed about previous episode, where it helps create this feeling of a culture within Starfleet and the Federation that doesn't feel just like, oh, it's Earth, but in the future. It's like, well, no, it's like in Starfleet, it's this high pressure, you could potentially die at any moment, high achieving society, so naturally you find ridiculous ways to blow off steam. And it's like, nice that it has a culture of its own.
Yeah, it's office shit. It's like it's playing waste paper basketball and stuff like that. It's just stuff to help you pass the time.
It's reinvigorating chewing gum through the transporter pad. We've all been there.
Yeah.
So good.
Oh, that was so great. That was another just totally brilliant thing that I never would have thought of to reference in Trek. That was great.
Yeah, no, I think what this is also showing me is that there is not a single weak link in this cast. Like, you look back at season 1 of DS9, you point at Alexander Siddig, and he becomes a great actor later on because, Bashir in those later seasons, great character. But it's like in that first season, it's rough. Here, there is not a single weak link. I think of every character and every actor, and it's like, not only do they have good dramatic methodology, but the comedic shots are incredible. Just the quick changes between Christina Chong and Rebecca Romaine, just completely diametrically opposite, playing off of the poor little ensigns. It feels like such a good bit. It's so fun.
I love when they're having the phaser duel, and she goes, wait, and she shoots her, and she's like, ow, that hurt, and then Chrissy's, Lana just sounds like, are you having fun yet? And
We're having fun.
It's so good.
Well, yeah, because you could almost compare apples for apples. It's like compare 5 episodes in of Lon to 5 episodes in of Dominic Keating.
Yeah.
Enterprise. It's like all these actors just have their characters right from the get-go. It feels like, anyway.
I think this comes from an evolution in this is storytelling refined, or coming into the 21st century of storytelling. We are more invested as viewers in characters as opposed to set pieces, whereas syndicated television was all about the set pieces and the characters were there to sort of advance the plot rather than be the plot themselves. In the most cases, and it's kind of what I think back to sort of especially Star Trek itself. The characters were there to have their style but be in service of the plot, whereas this is very much the other way around. The plot is in service of the characters.
Well, and I didn't think that early on. The first episode or two, it felt like the story was the main thing, and it feels like that's shifting and evolving now that we know the characters better. And maybe it was always there and we just weren't as cognizant of the characters
This
themselves.
is the other thing as well. Like, this is all set in
Yeah.
stone. Like back in syndicated television, they would probably get ratings live, and they would tweak things as they go. Like, obviously, they didn't have like a 3-month turnaround for CGI. They would have like stuff already pre-filmed and pre-planned to go in there at various points. So if you got halfway through the season, they're going, "We don't like this character," they would tweak. You know, the network would tweak it, the retool
they're
the show.
still actively they're in production as episodes are being released.
But this is done. These 10 episodes are done. They're filming season 2. There's nothing here to retool. There's no feedback they're going to get. They are hoping that these characters are going to hit, and thank God they are, really. You know, and this is one of the risks, I suppose, of doing it that way. You have to hope that your audience loves it, and luckily we do.
It really did kind of. It does feel like they've hit the ground running, and they've just like gone straight forward with it. And it's like, you know, you pointed to Dominic Keating, and it's like, I feel like it's a case of we have to point out it's not the actor's fault. Like, Dominic Keating is a good actor; he's shown that. Yeah. But it's more like a case of even like Worf in the same amount of time. Like in 5 episodes in, what do you know about him? Oh, he's basically unrecognizable from how he is in TNG and DS9. Same with almost any character, but here these characters feel fully formed, and like I'm just waiting to see what is going to come out of them, rather than these are people who are written into the series Bible, and they will be developed into a random direction as and when the writers' room decides to get around to them.
Exactly.
And that is just a strength of strong scriptwriting and confidence. Like, there's a lot of confidence in this show, and it really helps.
There was an interview for Melissa Navia, who plays Ortegas, and I think this really kind of shows this letting the actors be the characters, let them choose what the characters face. She was remarking on how, you know, being the most needy person on the set, because she was like, right, I want to see what is on, you know, she's at the pilot station, she wants to see what's on her screen at the time. She wants to know, right, where's the ship banking, what's the kind of systems that are at play here. She like really wants to, you know, she said, you read the interview, I can't recall it, someone can find it, but you know, she really wants to know every in-depth system so she can be that character, she can be in that moment. And she was directing the sort of movement for the character and everything and how that progresses. And I thought, you are now my favorite person, because you're not just sort of like playing to us needy nerds, but you're playing into like the character you want to be. You're putting everything into it, and I really respect that someone that, like T'Pring says later, you know, you have to want to be here, and that, you know, it kind of shows that. And I think they're doing that with a lot of this cast. They're saying to the cast, like, you know, bring your opinions in. We're not going to tell you how to do this. You know, we will tell you the character is supposed to be, but you know, they value their input and the kind of trajectory they want to take them, and that really shows here, definitely. Even for someone like
I also have to, I have to applaud this show for, we're like 5 episodes in, and we're already starting to build up a relatively strong rotation of supporting characters. Like Ensign Christina, this is the 3rd time we've seen her. She was the comm officer during.
She has not had the best luck. She was in sick bay last week.
Destroyed by Lan.
I know.
Yeah, like she was in sick bay last week. She was on the communication station in episode 2. Like, and it's like just putting these people, because of course you're going to see the same people. It's a ship of like 200 people. You're only going to see the same number of faces so many times, and having that sense of continuity is something that was lacking from, especially something like Voyager, where it should have been, you know, that should have been the Watchword should have been continuity, but it wasn't. But we've got Ensign Christina, Kyle. I wasn't expecting to warm to him quite so much. He's I want to know what the fuck's going on there. Is that them trying to game the system so they get assigned an easy touch, or is Kyle is he evil? Are we going to get? Yeah. And I was also really happy to see April again. April is already a cool character. I've said this before. I'm so glad we've dispensed with the old trope of the evil admiral, because it was done so to death in TNG and DS9, and like, just so nice to just like, hey, look, here's an authority figure. They are not evil. They are just, maybe they don't have the same, you know, killer instinct that our main characters do, because they are not the main characters, but you can rely on them to have your characters back, and you can grow attached to them. You know, it's a nice feeling. It makes the show feel more layered, and it makes you happy every time they turn up. You feel like this is a proper world.
I think it works well with recurring admirals, like Vance last season. You saw him pretty much every episode in season 3 and 4, and I think I think we're going to see more of April. I think because he's going to be recurring, they're not going to turn around and go, "Ha, he was Section 31 all along," and he'll start twirling his moustache, you know.
No, I think it's going to be more of a an Admiral Forrest kind of.
Admiral
Forrest, Admiral Ross, Cornwell. Like there is a good strong tradition of the good supporting admiral. I'm glad that they're keeping that going rather than just falling onto evil. I'm sure we're going to get an evil Commodore or an evil April. Or an evil admiral rather.
It has to be just like the Jellicoe of admirals. It just has to be the complete, like, you know, I am of the rules. I am this kind of dick. No, Pike, you can't just go off and do what you want. I want an explanation for everything you've been doing.
I'm picturing like the Ronald Tracy or the Matt Decker kind of character. I'm waiting for that to happen because that's one of the few Trek tropes we have not had. Yeah, we could get Decker. It's the right time period. So I'm really glad that like they're playing with it because they're hitting almost every single trope. And I think it was the same an interview. No, it wasn't the same interview with Melissa Navi. It was with Henry Alonso Myers, who I believe is the showrunner. And he was saying he wants to hit on almost every genre with every episode of the show, and just show we can do kind of everything. Because that is kind of what Star Trek's strength was. It's like you jet off to another part of the universe. Hey, we're doing a horror episode. We're doing a pure sci-fi episode. We're doing a morality play. And they are really leaning into that here to the point where they said, oh, we're going to do a horror episode. And it's like they're addressing all the tropes but doing it in such a recontextualized manner that it feels fresh. And what's the term? I want to see them do every of them. I'll do all the tropes.
What's the term when you do a trope but do it well? Like, because if you say when you do a trope, like it sounds almost disingenuous because you're doing something that someone else has done a load of time. Like it's not going where
good writing.
yeah. But it feels like that's cool.
That's the thing that I think, because I've been thinking about this because we've been watching these episodes. Like, why am I loving this so much? I mean, and because it's I'm not used to that right now.
I've been hurt before.
Something good's happening to me. It's weird.
No, well, because I mean, like even stuff that I've loved, have just been things that I think, well, that could be better, and this I really am struggling to come up with ways that they could do better. And the best that I've come up with is that they are not apologetic of tropes. They are not, they're not introducing something to subvert it. They're just putting stuff out on a silver platter. And it's like, look, these are tropes for a reason. They still work. If you do them well, they still work. And that's the best I can come up with of why I've loved this so much.
It's sincerity, I think, is what is shining through here. And I feel like that is also the reason why our A plot, which is Spock and Ring, I think that's why that works so well, is even though it's the most hackneyed, most overdone plot. Oh, the body swap. Like Sabrina the Teenage Witch did this, right?
Yes. Yeah.
But it's done with such sincerity, and the actors genuinely believe in it, and it advances the characters, and it's funny, so I don't mind one bit.
Before we go on to the A plot, let's do the P plot. Let's go to Pike just being the awesome diplomat he always is. But the one thing I liked with the Rongovians, I really liked, and like you said before, this is an episode of showing us other people's point of view. And like when we first saw it, we saw him arguing with the Tellarite, being logical with the Vulcans, and being downright friendly with the humans. And everyone's, my brain included, when I first watched this, and I thought, oh yeah, they just emulate things. And trusty Anson Mountain Pike flips that on his head and he goes, no, it's not like that at all. Like, they just want to see other people's point of view. And his whole speech, when he makes the point, it's like, why should you join the Federation? You're going to likely get into trouble because of our messes and our problems. I was like, it's such an anti-speech. It's like the anti-Picard speech, and I love it. He was so open, honest with them, and I kind of like, I want to join the Federation. Am I the Rongovians? Can I come on board now?
Well, I do appreciate a little bit of meta-commentary on your show, and that was a nice little bit of meta-commentary on the fact that, if you attach yourself to Starfleet and the Federation, you're going to get a drubbing by the Klingons or the Romulans or the Borg. But it's done with such aplomb, and he delivers it with such like sincerity. Again, it's the sincerity that sells it. And then it's like radical empathy. Like, what a Star Trek idea! What a wonderfully here are your planet of what's the term, the planet of hats, where like they have one defining trait. And it's like their thing is radical empathy of seeing people from the other people's point of view, and it's just like
it's a perfect way of exposing a 21st century metaphor. Like a lot of people, I hate throwing this term out there because I absolutely hate it. It's like people saying, "Oh, it's too woke," but it's not that. It's about people listening to people, which is something we've been learning to do over the last 10, 20 years. Like this is something that's coming out where, people with mental health problems and people with like other disabilities, we're learning to listen to them. We're learning to finally see things from their point of view and adapt to that and learn how to take other people's consideration. And this is the way of doing that metaphor without being too heavy-handed with it. It's done in a very Trek way, and I adored it. I really loved it.
Yeah, and they even go so far as to address like the Eddington complaint of assimilation, where like, he says, "Oh, you're worse than the Borg. At least they tell people you're going to be assimilated." And
Yes.
here Pike just says, "No, screw you. The Federation's great. Like it's all about celebrating diversity and being part of a greater whole. And yes, there are sacrifices and compromises to be made, but that's life. If you end up wanting like you can sit in the mud and take your ball and go away and not be part of this, or you can be part of something greater." And that is something that I really appreciate about Strange New Worlds. Is like this, and especially the first episode, believes in the Federation as an idea. And that's important. Like, that's something I really appreciate about Discovery season 3 and 4 is that that is the unifying theme of those episodes. And for people who were turned off by season 1 and 2 because they were so grim, this and Discovery both going back to the theme of, no, the Federation is a utopian dream that is worth striving towards. Yes, it's not perfect, but it is great. And I like that Strange New Worlds is committing to the bit, even though we know TOS has all kind of weird foibles and insane admirals, and we need to get women for the miners so that they don't go corny crazy.
But that through line is still there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So,
it's a belief in something greater, and that's important. But I think the most important thing to talk about in regards to Pike this episode is that command rap.
I wonder when we're going to get into that. Yeah, that's interesting. My controversial opinion is I don't think that's the best version of that command rap. I'm not entirely sold over it.
Who wore it better?
I think Kirk might have. Well,
Really?
Okay, no. I don't think Kirk wore it better. I think the version that Kirk wore was better. I don't think I think if Pike could, not me being a traditionalist, I think like there was something about the one that Pike wore with the slightly sort of shiny shoulders.
Looked like vinyl. I think.
And there was a couple of, he had one too many deltas on him.
I think it's kind of a hybrid between the command wrap of TOS and like the action jacket of TNG for Picard, where it's got like the plastic shoulder pads and stuff like that. I loved it. I thought it was great. I thought it was it was something out of I can't even really place it, but the color specifically, because the color is a little different than the command wrap of
it's a bit of a darker green, isn't it?
Yeah, and I thought it really stood out. I enjoyed it. I liked it.
Yeah, I think that there does have to be sort of like, in the end, that jacket exists because Shatner was out of shape. And so therefore, yes, I imagine that Shatner probably wore it well because it was made to,
Again, I don't think he wore it well. I think it looked... I liked the uniform. I don't like it on Shatner, but yeah.
The vinyl was a little bit distracting, but I ended up warming to it just because Anson Mount wears it well. Like, he just wears pretty much anything well, but he just suited it. It felt appropriate for the more relaxed tone of this episode for him to be wearing this command wrapper. It's just like, no, I'm just chilling out in space dock, and I'm just doing. And here's the thing: it looked really aesthetically pleasing to me, right next to the other Starfleet uniforms. Like when he was sitting at the table with April and Uhura, and it's just like, oh, that green just pops really nicely. Like there's just something about the color balancing that was just really nice to it. And that's a weird thing to say, but it's important to me. I like good color balancing in Trek.
And again, I said this on a previous episode. What is the code for wearing what uniform when? Can you just pick and choose? Like, because Uhura's, they're not in dress uniforms. Like April and Uhura are just in their standard uniform. I thought now is the time you wear dress uniforms. So Pike wearing his command wrap, fine, but the others weren't. So I'm a bit confused about the placement of it. If it's a case of like they just wanted to put the command wrap green out there, just go, haha, there it is. Okay, fine.
I mean, it's cool. I like it. I always appreciate a little bit more of I like a bit of diversity in the uniforms because you do get bored of the same red, blue, and yellow. You want a little bit of variation, and let captains have their silly things. I was always a little bit sad that Janeway never got anything a bit more silly other than the turtleneck she got to wear, which was just the standard DS9 uniform. So let Pike wear his silly vinyl green jacket. It makes him look cool. Shut up.
Okay, guys. Okay. let's go on to our Freaky Friday situation, the A plot, the Spock and T'Pring moment, which was just a delight. The whole thing. Yeah. I think my favourite moment is where they're both standing and I just chuckled up so much at this. That my favourite moment is where they're standing in front of Pike and they're explaining to him, and they say, you can probably tell by, we've swapped bodies, you can probably tell by her expression, and then just Pike's just like, what? The little series of expressions on his face.
Them like, you're fucking Vulcans, what am I meant to read here?
But yeah, the whole Freaky Friday part. Go on, guys.
Get out of town.
We might need to go on. Like, this has got some of the best one-liners that Trek has had in years.
Maybe ever.
Yeah, possibly ever. Like, I was saying this previously, but this doesn't feel like something that 90s Trek would have done. Maybe because they would have thought it was too silly. Maybe it was too appropriate for 60s Trek, where it was done very badly in Turn Out Intruder and a few other episodes, I think. It feels like it's done in such a way that it could only have been done now, because it's so loose and so fun and so well. And I have to give massive props. Like, Ethan Peck has been killing it from day one. Like, he's been great since Discovery Season 2. He just continues that here. The actress playing T'Pring, Gia Sandu, I believe her name is, fucking incredible. She does such a good job of setting up these like T'Pring mannerisms and her way of speaking that when Ethan Peck has to translate that into his thing, he's like, oh yeah, no, that's absolutely the same character. There is not a moment where you go, okay, that's obviously just them acting. It's like, no, I completely buy it. They build up the postures and they adopt their, they do all the appropriate body acting for it, and that's an important thing for a body swap episode.
She's a very good overbearing matriarch. Like, she has got Spock wrapped around her little finger without. But then even, and I don't want to say humanizes, vulcanizes maybe. Like, there's a moment where you start the episode and you think, good lord, she's a bit much. Like, she's a bit of a handful. But by the end of the episode, you very much sympathise, like, with T'Pring on both of the, like, they managed to come to a conclusion with both of their problems and both of their issues, and it's in a very healthy way, in a very healthy relationship of a way where they're actually talking about things by the end, instead of sort of being query response and all that.
Yeah, it almost makes you think that they have a chance. Wait.
We'll get onto tragedy. I've got a piece about tragedy later, but yeah, carry on this A plot.
Yeah, they did a really good job of making us sympathetic here, because like she's like kind of a cold-hearted bitch, and people liked that about her in TOS. Like, in an era full of Janice Lesters and other similarly badly written characters, like, it's nice to have a woman who is just like, no, I want what I want and I'm going to get it. And here, it just adds a dimension where that is absolutely still a part of her character. She is absolutely still a career-driven, I am for myself, you can come along if you want, but I ain't going to wait kind of person. And just make her feel a bit more, like you said, not more human, more Vulcan.
Yeah.
But also showing kind of like the plight that she has to deal with, picking up on the through lines in TOS and Discovery and Enterprise of Vulcan is a advanced society, but they still deal with tons of racism and all kinds of species issues. And she also does a really good job of conveying emotion through that emotions layer that all Vulcans like go through. Because
That's
I feel like
that is a real art to be able to play. Right, you cannot show any emotion because of your character, but you need to express like your disappointment or
she does a
your
lot
sadness or your anger.
Yeah.
She does a lot with pauses, which I feel like was like, you can hear the period drops in her sentences, and it's like, okay, that is an obvious expression of emotion, but there is no deviation in her voice.
She is out of
control. It is still just a statement. Yeah, exactly. And it's like, that's what separates...
it's kind of a hostile cordiality that is emblematic of a lot of Vulcan dialogue, but she really leans into it.
Yeah, because it's like, I feel like that's like the demarcation between a really good Vulcan actor and a really bad Vulcan actor, where bad Vulcan actors think it's just a case of act like a stuck-up asshole and don't let it phase you, whereas the good ones understand that there is absolutely a massive amount of simmering tension and emotion underneath there. It just doesn't come up unless you push them way too far. Like, that's like what Tim Russ got so well about Tuvok. It's just a case of you have to convey that they are feeling something, but they refuse to let it show. And she does like really good job of it in this episode. And especially like managing to replicate Ethan Peck, who I think five episodes plus however many he was in Discovery, he's already really recognizable as his own version of Spock. Like something I noticed about him, and I think you pointed out, he puts his arms behind his back a lot as kind of like his like trademark posture. And I think about Spock in TOS, and he kind of crosses his arms quite a bit. And I think, is that like meant to be a demarcation of like, that's this Spock, this is this Spock, and he's going to grow into that? I wonder if we're going to see an evolution of body language. But it really struck out to me here because you're paying a lot more attention to what they're doing with their hands and faces in this episode.
I wonder if he's a bit more of a social comedian, but yeah, go on.
Well, just I think that may have been leaned into more just so that when the body swap happens, it makes it more obvious because they change up their body positioning and, things like that. It just makes it, like we were talking about before, the visual language of the switching things around. But it may also be a thing where Spock is lower on the command chain, so he still is more the upright,
feels the need to assert himself. Yeah.
Well,
I could see
and
that.
then also being obedient, and then arms forward in more of a commanding, kind of directing posture. If you want to think of it in that way, that might be some choice that he's making there.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. Like that's the kind of the show this is, where I'm looking at actors, I'm thinking about the acting choices they're making, and I'm going, that's an interesting thing you're doing, and I'm not just. I just am in subtle appreciation of them all the way through the episode. Another thing I really appreciated, thank God they clue Pike in immediately and avoid the... Yeah. I was worried. I was like, please don't do that. We have to keep it... Because it was funny. It's really... Like, those moments when Anson Mountain's playing off of them both is hilarious. But that could have gotten real old real fast.
That whole 5-minute section I would lift out and watch that on loop. But by the time like Pike enters the quarters to when he pulls T'Pring/Spock out, just that is pure gold. That whole section is just flawless. It's so good.
Yeah, there's almost an element of like a who's on first type thing to it, where it's just like a lot of clever little bits of wordplay and fun little snarky little Vulcan comments, and it plays so well and so naturally. It's just really well done.
No, it's fantastic. The whole bit where Spock as T'Pring talking to Chapel and again we'll come on to Chapel a little bit later, but like sort of expanding on his relationship with T'Pring and him sort of, Chapel's been a bit of a horn dog in this episode, but also a little bit of a, she's like, so you've never been, you're in your other half's body, and, he's just like, okay. She's got the little wink and nudge in there, hasn't she? But sort of using her... She's
the Kirk of the series.
Definitely. They definitely interwove her plot coming off of sort of, M'Benga's plot, and, wove it into... Spock's plot as well, and added to that layer of tragedy, which it is almost a Shakespearean tragedy. We know what's going to happen there with Chapel. We know what there is, but god damn, if Kate, I keep calling her Kate Bush, it's Jess Bush. If Jess Bush,
that's a very different version of Chapel as Kate
person,
Bush.
Yes, no babushkas here. This version of Jess Bush, like, she plays it so well. Again, it's micro expressions. It's those little looks, those little nods, a little sort of like the way she sort of draws herself back in when she's confronted with something, the way she sort of winks and smiles when she's addressing something. And I think the best part is when she's talking to Spock over the dinner table, when he's sort of like, he's had that argument with T'Pring, so he's gone and hit the bar up like, every couple does, every man in the couple does. And she sort of like talks to him, and then she just looks up, and you can see everything in one expression right there. And then at the end, when she's talking to Ortegas, and she's trying to not talk about this new crush she's developing, and she's like, no, we're not talking about it. It's just everything. It
would have to be the right man.
I would give her I would give her the star for acting this episode. Like, she does a lot with what she's given in this, and it's
she does such a good job of projecting confidence that you immediately notice the instant it draws back even a little bit. She has such an aura of charisma and like the instant it draws back because she's uncertain or because she doesn't want to like emotionally attach herself to someone, you notice and you're going, okay, that is a really nuanced emotional character there. And knowing again what we know of her in the future, I am really interested to know what the deal is, because that could be any number of different things, and it feels like she's an emotionally messy and complex character, and that's good. That's something to dig into that I want to learn more about. But yeah, I did also absolutely love when she's sitting at the bar with Deva, who is her on again, off again, like fuck buddy. I guess that's what I'm going to call it.
On her side of it is, on him, he's a bit more.
Oh, yeah, he was absolutely invested, and like I love that the sound dropped out. It audibly dropped out the instant he was like, "Look, I want to talk about," and she was like, "Oh God, I need to find the most emotionally unavailable man in the room." And then she looks to the left, sees Spock, is like, "Perfect."
Yeah. All the time she's just dropping his like, we need to go back to my room. We need to go. Should we go? Should we go? And he's just like, I want to talk about us.
The landing lights are up, bro.
Yeah. Read the room. Come on, mate. Yeah, I think this was like, for all, it was the Spock plot for things there. It was the Pike plot for the thing, and then Lan and Una. Like, I think that Chapel's plot was by far the most emotionally strongest. Like, especially for existing Trek fans, because this don't end well. Like, none of this is going to work out for her, and it is so sad to watch. It's watching a train wreck. It's horrible. I hate it, but I can't explain it any more than that in feelings.
No, that's the kind of the big thing of like the rom-com, is you need the emotional through line, and Chapel provides that. Like, everyone else's plot is comedic and fluffy and light, but you think about Chapel and what she's got kind of waiting for it. I thought it was only going to be a thing with Pike because he's the only one who knows his future, but they're really leaning into the fact that they are a prequel, and they are aware of it, and they are aware that you are like, oh, another prequel, like I already know how the story ends. And they're leaning into that to build tragedy and to build hope and foreshadowing, to the point where you look at Chapel making such an obviously bad decision. Such a like girl, this is not going to end well for you. And she knows it. She knows it's a bad idea. But you're like, but I can see why she would emotionally invest herself like this, and you feel bad for it. It creates a nuance to the character and a sympathy, which is important.
Well, and then that works both ways, because there are two kinds of people that are coming to this: people that have seen TOS and people that really haven't, or don't know the depth and breadth of the story. So you can either read it as, like, if you know what's going to happen, then yes, it's the tragic foreshadowing of things that will eventually come to ruin for these characters, or you can just be watching it as like, oh, well, this is the start of something. I wonder where that's going to go. So
almost makes me wish this was an alternate universe, because like if they said, oh yeah, Strange New Worlds is set in Kelvin Plus or whatever, and
Kelvin Plus,
yeah, and I'll be like, okay, now I wonder if they'll take this somewhere. Like, I want to raise those hopes. I want to have this Ross and Rachel moment, but I just know it's not.
The Kelvin movies wish they could like get to this level of emotional complexity. They really do.
See, and that was the thing that I was thinking about, is you were talking about the subtleties of the acting choices and stuff like that, and the only reason that we can get to that point is because all the dialogue and story and plot just goes down so smoothly, and you just are so deeply absorbed into it right away that you can notice these subtleties. It's like you can get 2 and 3 levels into the acting and things like that. So it's like, it's just a testament to how well all of this hangs together, is that we can talk about that stuff even.
Yeah, no, we can have an hour-long conversation about Nurse Chapel's feelings because it's there, it's in the text, and you can just, the pacing is such that you can just dig into it and enjoy it and think about what it's going to be for the future, because yeah, we may know how the story ends, but we want to know what her journey through it is going to be like, and how well or how badly she takes it as things go, and whether or not there's a certain Dr. Roger Corby in the future.
Well, yes, there was a tweet on on Twitter, funnily enough, recently someone says like, "Oh, do we going to see Roger Corby in the future?" And I think Akiva Goldsman, who is sort of like kind of one of he's not the showrunner, but he's the overall executive producer,
I believe. I think,
for a couple of Star Trek series as well. But he said, "Keep your eyes peeled." Essentially, like I believe that has to be in the cards at some point. They have to address the Corby situation because he's quite a big part of her life. And bearing in mind, she has come on a statement and said like, I'm not into big serious commitments. He was her fiance, she was his fiance.
Yeah.
Like, it's got to have a massive impact on her at some point. So whether we don't know the timings, so this could have happened, or could still happen. We don't know.
Yeah, it reminds me of the Una plot with the engineer thing, where Rebecca Romaine said this is going to be going into season 2 and forward. So they absolutely have intentions of carrying these threads all the way through, even though it's an episodic series. So. All of this is on the cards. I think there are so many people who are worried that they're not going to do Roger Corby. They don't know who Roger Corby is, and they're like, oh no, we
remember
here
Andrea.
is season 2. There is Dr. Roger Corby in circled thing. It's going to get addressed. Just give us time. Yeah. We're easing you into it, because if we throw Roger Corby at you straight away, you're going to accuse us of fan service, and you'd probably be right. But as it is, we're letting you get attached to Nurse Chapel as a character before we break your hearts with the actual situation.
What if Dever was actually Roger Corby, but he changed his name?
Wow, he's even less cool than I thought he was.
Yeah. All right, okay. I think we've come to that time. Do we need to give... any complaints about this episode?
Oof.
Like, we have been gushing about this episode. I think my only issue maybe is... I'm not as keen on the command rep ring. Maybe it was a bit over dramatic when all the candles went out. I was a bit like, it was like suddenly it's like doom, dramatic effect. Or maybe that was a bit too much, but I can't really complain about that.
Well, even stuff that I in the moment feel like, oh well, you're just doing this to make the sitcom plot ramp up. Stuff like, the diplomats will only talk to you, Spock. Just at that moment. Yeah. But then it makes sense because like he's the only Vulcan on the ship, so they want to talk to another species to get that perspective of another species. Then they saw him the first time too. So they're like, oh, okay, well he's the one. He's the next one that we can talk to. So that makes sense once you understand the whole, you see the story in full. So yeah, I don't have much.
I really don't.
I have no complaints here. So, I don't know about you, gentlemen, but I am giving this, out of 10 spots of Enterprise bingo, this is 10 out of 10 spots of Enterprise bingo for me. This is perfect.
Big.
Yeah, and 10 lirpas out of 10.
10 ceremonial gongs for me. I feel so bad giving. I don't know why I feel guilty giving an episode 10 out of 10, but I've watched this episode 3 times now. I watched it when it first came out, and I watched it the other night when I was, sitting in front of the iPad and just sort of watching telly. And I thought I'll just put it on while the kids are still awake, and I wasn't going to watch, something a bit more raunchy. And then I watched it now just with us, and I have enjoyed it all 3 times, and it's not even been out a week yet.
This is going to go in the rotation with, Take Me Out to the Hollow Street and Bride of Chaotica and like all of those episodes. It's going to go in that rotation because it is just such a well put together comic piece that stands either as part of a series or on its own. It's just so well done. Like 10 out of 10. I have no reservations about saying that. And maybe it's odd to look at 4 episodes of strong sci-fi and then go, the low stakes body swap episode. That's the one I like the most.
That's the best one.
But it's how I feel.
Yeah, you can't get over that.
and at the same time, it's like, do you want to make the gag, the comedy episode, your top of the mountain? It's like, I kind of have to, just because
it's good.
Yeah.
But you don't want them to do it every week, but it's great when they do it. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because that's what a good comedic episode can do. Is it's just that big exhale after the big stress episode, just and then it's just chill. I mean, it's like what I said before in another episode where when Trek hits me right, it's that big warm blanket, and this is like one of those Sherpa-lined like snuggies that you just wrap yourself all the way up in. It's just it's perfect.
So comfortable. It's comfortable.
Yeah.
Definitely. This is the Tog 10 of episodes. All right, I think we've got enough. Thank you everyone for watching. We will be back at some point next week after the next episode. We're at the end of the synopsis. I actually have not watched the previews. All I knew Spock and Amok was the last one I read of the initial 5 synopses they released pre-season. So I'm excited to see what comes next week. I've got no idea. So this is gonna be fun.
I have seen the teaser trailer and it looks interesting.
Interesting.
I am interesting. It's interesting.
Well, from myself and from everyone else,
You're always interesting.
Yeah. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.